so there are no surprises later. So for example, do you need the category tree? Do you need all the orders? Do you need all the customers? Do you need the payment information for that specific payment plugin that you've used in your Magento shop? So these are all the questions that you should answer first before starting. Also, secondly, use the right tool. It really depends on your specific requirements. Different requirements require different tooling. For example, small tasks. It's okay if you do a simple SQL query. That often does the job. And for other requirements, you need a big migration assistant. So, and third, if things do not work as planned, have in mind that some small things can sometimes have a big impact. We'll come to that a bit later. So a simple index in a database can potentially save your day. So what is the target audience for your session today? We have some general tips, but also some specific ones. So let's assume here you're currently maintaining a shop running on Magento 1 and you're planning on migrating to Shopware 6. Ideally, you also want to migrate your customers, your orders, and you want to minimize downtime when switching over to your next e-commerce platform. So our first tip here is start thinking about very early in the development process. Taking this into account can save you a lot of time later, like unnecessary mapping functions. So think about migration before you create your sales channels, before creating your category tree or CMS pages, because migration has a big impact of this. And most importantly, think about it before go live. So you need to look at this topic like a separate challenge in your project. At first, it's a very bumpy road, but you fine-tune and optimize on the way until you get the desired result. So how to get started? So first, download the Migration Assistant plugin from the store, check out the linked user guide, and there are also some very useful migration talks from the last 2 community days. This gets you a good kickoff to relocate your customers. So after the setup and pre-mapping, change your Shopware environment also from develop to production. This is very important because it gives you big performance improvement, and run a test migration. So after the initial pre-mapping, you need to decide which data you want to migrate. With this sample folio slide here, that gives you a bit an overview. So there are dependencies between data types. For example, you cannot import orders without the customers and their ordered product. So you can see that as a dependency tree here. So basic data sets up sales channels, customer groups, and clones the Magento category tree. So then the products are assigned to the according shop categories, and ordered are linked to the ordered products. So this is why you have this kind of dependency tree. Customers are the most valuable, and you want them to smoothly relocate to your new shop without any login troubles or missing addresses. So there may be reasons, after looking at this dependency tree, where you want to handle your migration differently. So if your shop is not the main system that handles your orders and products, there may be faster migration options. Like for example, you can also use the Shopware Sync API. But let's try out the full-fledged migration power. And we hit the start button for the first time. So this is how it looks like. And if you're done here, like Migration Assistant is done, if you're done here, you have hit the jackpot. This really works well with small, very standard-like shops, but most systems that I've seen are heavily customized and have at least some extensions to the data model. So in our first tries, after taking the migration challenge, we were running into several issues. So the database was fairly big. It has already been migrated one time, so from a Magento 1 shop to another Magento 1 shop, which meant some legacy data. Additionally, a huge amount of customer and order data from many different countries and sales channels have added up. So initially, the process took 3 days to complete on a developer machine. You can speed up that process in the beginning if you duplicate your Magento database and clean it up a little. So after the first run, it's time to check the result in the Shopware administration. In most cases, we have seen quite good results on first sight. But let's face it, the real work has just begun. So the first thing you should do after checking the administration is to have a look at the migration login table. Because the summary in the Migration Assistant doesn't tell you the whole truth. It's the table that does. So we've been hit with a whooping 100,000 warnings in this table. And waiting for 3 days, it was time to take a deep breath and start our first analysis. Why has everything failed? So data inconsistencies are not rare in productive e-commerce systems, but it's also nothing you should have afraid of. It's just something that you should take in early consideration, that you will probably need to fix some of them. Luckily, most of the error descriptions are quite forward and detailed. So let's have a look at this one example on this slide. So it clearly says that in this case, the shipping method free shipping was not available anymore. Like in cases like this, it's best to read the missing data in the source. It's best to fix the missing data in the source system. So restore the shipping method in the Magento system and try again. So most errors repeat with every migrated object. So don't be very intimidated by 100,000 warnings, because it's probably often the same error. So the next time you will start the process again, you will already see big improvements. So other data inconsistencies that we have seen in our project can include like products without an SKU, like country codes that are not ISO. So we had, for example, GB versus UK. So it's all these kind of legacy data that can give you some errors in the migration process. Also payment methods from legacy payment providers, because they have switched the payment plugin from one provider to the other one that has been deleted, and so on. So from our experience, it's best to fix this already in Magento. And if that doesn't work for you, then clone the Magento, write the script, and then apply it every time that fixes these SQL queries. So in a further second step, it's wise to check the result in the Shopware administration and to compare it to the original one in the Magento shop. When we have a look at this example, we see that a field is missing in Shopware that was added in Magento. So it gives you an information about how the customer has heard about your brand. So apparently the customer entity in the Magento system was extended. So we just saw that the customer model was extended, which means if you want to keep that field, you need to handle that by extending the Shopware migration profile. Also, special plugins often extend entities, or payment plugins save their transaction data in separate database tables. You always need to weigh in effort against benefit and decide if this special field should be migrated or not. And if it should, then you need to take care of. So at this point, I will hand over to Daniel.
So thank you very much. One thing additionally about all the errors that you're facing during migration, often the CLI application will just fail with an error message. So the hint with looking up in the table, in the logging table, is really, really valuable. And you should do this from the beginning. So we will now have a deeper look at how we extend migrations. So the documentation here is really, really good. So you can just look it up, get familiar with it. There are 6 different things you need to consider. So there are pre-mappings in there. It's the mapping of custom values to values that are already present in the origin system. Data sets, this is how this data will consist of PDFs, media, extra translations, and so on. There are the readers. This is how you query the database that you're migrating from. Also the converters. We are checking if a field might be required or can be empty. And in the end, it's just a writer. You define the entity in Shopware 6, and the Shopware DAL will take care of the rest. So, to get the fields that Ben mentioned earlier migrated to Shopware, we created a new migration plugin that extends the existing Shopware migration profile. So, Shopware delivers already a migration profile for Magento 1.9, in our case. And we started extending the customer reader and the customer converter to support these missing fields. So we extended the Magento customer reader, added some custom logic to the read function, so basically how the tables are joined together, wrote our own fetch function, and appended the result to the customer array. In the end, it was cleaned up and returned, and then the data was automatically added to the entity in Shopware. Also, we added the converter, or we extended the converter in, I think I switched the steps because in the converter there's checked if the field is required, but this field is how they are changed, or how the value is converted to a value that can be used with Shopware later on. Yeah, after our migration run, we can finally see the field in the administration. And we just started to gradually edit all other fields that need to be migrated there. And in the end, yeah, the migration was done. But we still faced some other problems. Performance problems. As Ben mentioned, the migration took around 3 days. I think it was even more. So we needed to find some solutions to get this running on a production system without having a downtime of 3 days. So the recommendations here are, if you have a large data set, you should always start the migration from the command line. So this is really, really, really important because in administration it might hang up. You always need to have the window open, otherwise it will stop running. Next thing, before running it from the command line, you will need to have do the data check and the pre-mapping configuration in the administration, and only after you did this, you can start the actual migration process. Another small hint is here, do not run Symfony in development mode, instead switch to production. This will save you a lot of memory and also time. So this is really something, just don't do it. We also found out that for 1 million data sets that we wanted to migrate, it was necessary to allocate around 64 to 128 gigabytes of memory on the instances. We also found out that we had to increase the batch size. So this was something that we had to change inside the plugin itself without just only extending it, because there are all private methods. We increased the batch size from 200 to 500, which had a huge performance impact. So only this change alone saved us maybe 50% of the time. Around that. Also, increasing the batch size will also requires you to add more memory to it. So that's how we reached the numbers of up to 128 gigabytes. And in the end, the max package size should also be, in a MySQL server, should also be increased as of the bigger batch size and so on. So by only applying this step, we reduced the time already by around 50%. Yeah, but why is it still slow? It took some time to figure out why it was that slow. And in the beginning, we didn't know where to look at. We had huge memory consumption, but the migration itself ran fine, there were no errors. So we had to look up where we lost our time. And this was actually the Magento database that slowed us down. So we enabled in the MySQL database the slow query log, which shows you which queries are running for pretty long time. So it's easy to identify which queries are the ones that are slowing you really down. So here's an example of it. This query consumed more than 5 minutes every 100 orders in the Magento 19 order reader. So this is a problem in Magento itself. And after we found out, we added an index on this table, or on these columns in the table, which led to, in the beginning it was more than 5 minutes per 100 customers. In the end, the query only took a few milliseconds. So this improved things heavily. So after you found all these slow SQL queries and also fixed them, added the indexes on it. Also another note, indexes will only take up more memory on the database server, but improving performance at all generally in most MySQL servers. So this is normally, as storage space is always cheaper, it's a good way to solve this problem. So, and then some final tips after we did the go live, or after the migration ran successfully in production. You should not uninstall the Migration Assistant plugin, as there are some core features in it which will be used afterwards, like the password encoder. So Magento migrates the password to the new format in Shopware, and only if the customer logs in, it will be changed to the new version. And another part, another part that's really, really crucial. If you're changing your data on the production system after migration ran, you should not try to run the migration in the same data set again, as the hashes get calculated on both sides, and this will lead to the same entities will be migrated a second time, which might not be what you want to achieve. So our conclusion of this migration project, process was, it wasn't easy. So the migration itself is never easy. We spend a lot of time preparing it. We spend a lot of time hunting down the errors and performance improvements. It's super necessary to prepare a good plan. Have a plan what should be migrated, as Ben mentioned. This is key to success, as in most things. Using the right tools and processes, also taking care of the performance. Of course, a production system should not be down for 3 days when doing the go live. And as we saw with the indexes, small things really make a huge difference. So thanks for your attention, and thank you that you're all here.